In the city of Meridian, skyscrapers pierced the clouds like ambitions forged into glass. Every light had a purpose, every person had a plan, and somewhere high above that restless maze, Ethan Cole sat in silence. He was 34, the kind of man people admired from afar but never approached. CEO of Meridian Technologies, architect of precision, commander of control. To the world, he was success sculpted in flesh, but in truth, he was a ruin wearing an expensive suit. Once, Ethan had believed in something softer, in laughter, in late-night promises, in love that didn't need to be measured. Until the day he watched his fiancée walk away. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she said he had stopped feeling anything at all. The betrayal broke him in quiet ways, not with fury, but with silence. From that night forward, Ethan lived by a single rule. Emotion is a weakness. He built walls higher than his towers, colder than the steel beams that held them. Assistants came and went, each leaving with trembling hands and polite excuses. The boardroom at Meridian Tower was a cathedral of discipline. White marble floors gleamed under sterile light. Chrome edges lined every table. The city's pulse beat beyond the glass, a reminder of how small even power could feel. Ethan stood by the window, tablet in hand, reviewing projections that had already lost their meaning. Then, a door opened. He didn't look up. People rarely entered without permission, but this time, someone did. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," a woman's voice said, calm, steady, unshaken. He turned slightly. She wasn't like the usual new hires. No overconfidence to prove, no fear to hide. She wore a cream silk blouse, tucked into a navy pencil skirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, hair gathered in a loose bun that somehow looked both effortless and professional. A simple silver chain rested at her collarbone, glinting under the office light. There was something in her eyes, soft brown, yet quietly observant, that didn't flinch under pressure. "I'm Ava Morgan," she said. "HR mentioned I'll be assisting you temporarily, until they find a permanent replacement." Temporary. The word lingered like an old echo. Everyone thought they were temporary around him. Most were right. He simply nodded toward the desk beside his and went back to his work. Hours passed. Ethan barely spoke, yet he noticed everything. The way she typed, quiet, deliberate, without tapping her nails. The way she arranged his files, by relevance, not alphabet. And how every morning his coffee appeared exactly when he reached that pause between decisions. One sugar, no cream. She never asked, she just knew. Most tried to impress him. Ava simply did her job. No nervous chatter, no forced smiles. Just presence, calm, grounded, almost unnervingly composed. By afternoon, he found himself glancing at her reflection in the glass more than once. Not because he was intrigued, but because she didn't look like someone trying to survive him. And for a man used to control, that was strangely disarming. It was close to 9 p.m. when Ethan realized he wasn't alone. The office had emptied hours ago, but Ava was still there, bathed in the soft glow of her desk lamp, eyes tracing lines of print with quiet precision. He spoke without looking up. "You're still here." "So are you," she said gently. No sarcasm, no flattery, just truth. "You don't have to impress me by overworking." "I'm not," she replied, eyes never leaving the page. "I just don't like leaving things halfway done." Ethan's brow lifted slightly, an expression he hadn't worn in a long time. Her answer reminded him of himself, the version that once cared too much before he learned not to care at all. When she finally gathered her things, she paused by the window. Rain streaked the glass, turning the skyline into a painting of light and blur. "It's strange," she murmured. "How beautiful the city looks when no one's left to see it." He wanted to reply, but the words caught somewhere between his chest and throat. So he just stood there, pretending her sentence hadn't reached something he thought had died long ago. His home was immaculate. Marble floors, sharp corners, furniture that looked sculpted more than lived in. It was everything success was supposed to feel like. except it felt empty. He poured himself a drink, sat by the window, and watched the city pulse below, endless, golden, alive. And yet his thoughts wandered to the woman in the cream blouse who didn't fear silence. He replayed her words in his mind. I just don't like leaving things halfway done. Simple, but something about it echoed louder than the storm outside. Maybe because that's what he had done, left things halfway. Half-truths, half love, half living. He set the glass down, staring at his reflection, the man everyone called unstoppable, yet who couldn't remember the last time he felt alive. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't open his laptop before bed. He just sat there, letting the storm breathe against the glass. And somewhere in that quiet, something stirred, small, fragile, but undeniably there. A heartbeat he thought had long gone silent. Ethan arrived earlier than usual, expecting silence. But as the elevator doors opened, soft movement caught his eye. Ava was already there, files sorted, coffee ready, the air faintly scented with vanilla and paper. She looked up, surprised, but not startled. Morning, Mr. Cole. You're early. You are too. He found himself almost smiling, a faint, fleeting curve that startled even him. It wasn't charm. It was gratitude, hidden behind old habit. The day unfolded, meetings, numbers, decisions. But something had changed. For the first time, Ethan realized he didn't hate being there. He didn't feel that familiar pressure behind his ribs, because somewhere between the rain and the silence, he'd found a new rhythm. Not in success, not in numbers, but in presence, a calm voice, quiet footsteps, and a kind of peace he had forgotten how to recognize. That night, as Ethan stood again by his window, the city lights blurred in reflection. He saw her there, not physically, but in memory. The calm in her tone, the steadiness in her gaze. He didn't know what she was healing in him. He only knew that for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about what he'd lost. He was thinking about what he might find again. And though he didn't realize it yet, Ava Morgan wasn't just another assistant. She was the quiet storm his still heart had been waiting for. And like every storm, she would leave beauty and ruin. Weeks passed quietly, like sunlight sliding between tall glass towers. Ava Morgan had become part of Ethan Cole's rhythm, almost invisibly. She didn't just assist him, she balanced him. Each morning she left a note beside his schedule. A quote, a line, a reminder that life wasn't all deadlines and profit margins. Even machines need maintenance. Deadlines aren't lifelines. Tiny, handwritten things he pretended to ignore, but never threw away. He found himself depending on her calm more than he'd admit. Her quiet steadiness filled the spaces between decisions. Her kindness, simple, uncalculated, began melting something long frozen inside him. It was a Wednesday morning. A $40 million deal sat on the table, bleeding red across the projections. Investors shifted nervously, waiting for Ethan's next move. His composure was legendary, but even legends crack under pressure. Charts flickered on the glass wall. Then Ava, standing just behind him, leaned close and whispered, "You missed something." He blinked. "What?" She pointed. A small revenue segment misreported in the quarterly data. A hidden figure no one else had noticed. It turned a projected loss into a break-even forecast. Ethan adjusted the numbers, explaining with crisp authority. By the time he finished, investors were nodding, relief replacing panic. The deal was saved. When the room emptied, he turned toward her. "You've got an eye for detail. I used to handle financial reports in my last job," she said lightly, gathering papers. "Where was that?" She hesitated, just a flicker, like a cloud passing sunlight. "A small firm, nothing important." He noticed the deflection, but didn't press. Everyone had ghosts. He just didn't expect hers would one day become his undoing. Ethan rarely took breaks, but one evening, he found himself on the rooftop terrace, city glowing beneath him, coffee in hand. Ava joined him, her own cup steaming in the cool air. She stood beside him, quiet, comfortable. "You ever feel like this city's too loud?" she asked softly. He glanced at her. "It's the only noise I understand." She smiled faintly. "That's sad." And true. For a moment, they stood in shared silence, two people bound by different kinds of loneliness. The wind played through her hair, and he watched the calm way she occupied the moment. He'd met hundreds who wanted his time. She was the first who simply shared it. Ava worked quietly under the lamp's glow, the city's neon painting her desk in gold and blue. Ethan stayed late again, telling himself it was for work, though he knew the truth. He just didn't want to leave before she did. Walking past, he noticed a sketchbook half hidden under her folders. A page peeked out, a charcoal drawing of the city skyline from his office window. But in the reflection of the glass, she had drawn him, standing alone. "You draw," he said softly. She froze, then nodded. "Sometimes it helps me think." He leaned closer. Her strokes were deliberate, thoughtful. She had captured not just his image, but his isolation. It is unsettling to see himself through someone else's eyes. He saw loneliness he had long ignored. "You see too much," he murmured. "Only what's there," she replied. Their eyes met and something wordless passed between them. The kind of understanding that doesn't need language. Something human, something dangerous. A storm rolled over the city. Thunder cracked above Meridian Tower as staff rushed to leave early. Only two people stayed, Ethan and Ava. They were reviewing a last-minute proposal when lightning split the sky, throwing silver light across the glass walls. Moments later, the power flickered and went half dark. "Looks like we're tracked," Ava said with a small laugh. Ethan smiled, a real one, rare and unguarded. "You afraid of storms?" "No," she said quietly. "Just the kind that leave without warning." Her words hit deeper than she knew. He thought of his past, of people who'd left mid-storm without looking back. And for a moment, he wanted to promise he wouldn't be like them. But he didn't. Instead, they kept working in the soft glow of emergency lights, their shadows flickering across the glass. Time slowed, and for the first time in years, Ethan Cole forgot what loneliness felt like. That night, he dreamt of her. Not in a romantic haze, but in moments. Her laugh, her gaze, the quiet way she listened. He woke before dawn, restless. Work couldn't distract him anymore. She had become part of his thoughts, not by demand, but by presence. He started noticing everything. The same pen she always carried, the way she touched her necklace when nervous, how her eyes softened when others raised their voices. He had built walls for years, but now someone was quietly building a door. A meeting erupted into chaos. Lucas Dane, the rival executive, had been pushing to take over Ethan's new branch proposal. Sharp, arrogant, and jealous of Ethan's control, Lucas threw a file onto the table. "Cole, your projections are sentimental. You're not thinking like a businessman anymore." Ethan's jaw tightened. He was ready to counter. But Ava spoke first. "Actually, Mr. Dane," she said calmly, "his projections prioritize sustainability, not short-term greed. It's the smarter approach." The room fell silent. Lucas smirked. "And you are his assistant," she said, unwavering. "But I read the numbers." Ethan almost smiled, not from arrogance, but pride. For the first time, someone defended him, not his title, but his truth. After the meeting, he found her at her desk. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she replied. "You were right. And if you'd been wrong, then I'd apologize. But I wasn't." Her confidence disarmed him. It reminded him of the man he used to be, before heartbreak stole his courage. Days turned into late nights into unspoken moments. Ethan had stopped watching the clock whenever she was near. They never discussed personal lives. But every glance, every pause, spoke what words couldn't. Still, there was distance in her, a weight behind her smile, as if part of her lived elsewhere. One evening, he caught her staring at a photo on her phone, a man and a small child. When she noticed him watching, she quickly locked the screen. "Your family?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Someone I used to take care of," she whispered, before everything changed. Then she turned and walked away. That night, for the first time since she entered his life, Ethan couldn't sleep. He didn't know what haunted her past, but he knew one truth. She was healing something in him while hiding something in herself. And the more he tried to stay professional, the less possible it became. Every day, Ava Morgan taught him how to feel again, how to listen, how to laugh, how to care. He started arriving earlier, leaving later, caring more. And every time she smiled, it felt like the city lights burned just for them. But what he didn't know, what even all his logic couldn't predict, was that love wasn't the only secret she'd brought into his office. And soon, that secret would shatter everything he'd rebuilt. Love enters quietly, without permission, then rewrites whatever felt permanent. Ethan Cole didn't notice when mornings began waiting for Ava's good morning, or when evenings stretched longer just to catch her last smile. He didn't say the word love. He didn't believe in it anymore. But the way he looked at her, the way his voice softened when she spoke, the hush between them had become something almost sacred. And she felt it too, though she never said it aloud, because Ava Morgan carried something inside her that could shatter the peace she had brought into his world. It was a Friday glimmering with good news, a record quarter, contracts secured, expansion approved. Employees filled the glass atrium, applause rising like light. Ethan walked in with Ava beside him. For the first time in years, he wasn't the cold CEO people feared. He was human. He smiled. He thanked his team. When Ava's eyes met his across the crowd, the city could have vanished, and he wouldn't have noticed. After the event, he closed his office door. "You've been with Meridian for 3 months, he said at the window. "In that time, everything's changed, including me." She blinked, uneasy. "I just did my job, Mr. Cole." He studied her face, the steadiness, the ache behind it. "No, Ava, you reminded me how to feel again." Her breath caught. The words hung between them with the weight of something irreversible. For a moment, her eyes softened, hope, fear, and longing, folding into one fragile look. Then she turned away. "Ethan, don't." "Don't what?" "Don't make me something I can't be." He stepped closer, careful, patient. "You're already something I can't lose." For a heartbeat, she almost let herself believe it. But she couldn't. Not with what she was hiding. "You don't know who I really am," she whispered. "Then tell me." Her voice trembled. "Not yet." She left. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in years, Ethan's heart stood open, suddenly afraid again. The storm arrived at dusk, wild, electric, unforgiving. Ethan stayed long after everyone had gone, staring at a city that refused to explain anything. He had survived market shocks and boardroom betrayals, but this ache was different. Vulnerability, and he hated it, because it proved how much she mattered. She stood there, rain-dark hair clinging to her face, breath uneven. "I didn't think you'd still be here." "Neither did I." She stepped inside, light pooled behind her, catching on raindrops. "I need to tell you something," she said. "But you have to promise not to see me differently." "Ava, whatever it is, just promise." He nodded. She drew a breath that seemed to scrape against her ribs. "The firm I used to work for wasn't small. It was Dane Corp." The name hit like a blunt strike. Lucas Dane, his rival, his saboteur. "What?" "I worked in their finance division for almost 2 years. Lucas was my boss. I left when I realized he was manipulating data, the same projections I flagged in your deal." His face hardened. disbelief and anger flashing at once. You worked for him. Yes, but I didn't come here for him. I came to make it right. And I'm supposed to believe that? Her voice frayed. I didn't betray you, Ethan. I helped you. Every late night, every line I checked was to repair what I failed to stop there. He turned away, breath tight. You should have told me. I wanted to, but you'd never have trusted me if I did. Thunder rolled like an argument none of them could win. You think trust can be built on omissions? His tone was a blade. Tears burned in her eyes. It wasn't a lie. It was a mistake, one I've spent every day trying to correct. He wanted to believe her. God, he did. But the old break inside him, the one hidden beneath all the armor, wouldn't let him. Leave, he said quietly. Ethan, I said leave. She didn't look back. When silence returned, Ethan realized what losing something real felt like, again. Ava didn't come back the next morning, or the one after. Her desk stayed neat, untouched, like she'd been erased instead of departed. HR reported she'd resigned. No notice, no reason, just gone. The absence was louder than any noise he'd ever known. Every file tab in her handwriting, every empty coffee cup, every open space she used to stand in, echoed. Weeks slid by. Ethan submerged himself in work. Board meetings, conferences, cameras. He looked perfect again, polished, detached, unreachable. But late at night, when the building exhaled and lights fell to embers, he waited. For her voice, her footsteps. That quiet laugh that made even silence feel alive. They never came. The annual Meridian Gala sparkled with chandeliers and champagne, an evening of gloss over hollowness. Ethan moved through it like a well-dressed ghost. People congratulated him on the quarter. He smiled with practiced warmth that never reached his eyes. Then he saw her, Ava, across the room in a deep blue dress, hair loose, posture unburdened. She looked lighter. Beside her stood a man, older, confident. Lucas Dane. Everything inside Ethan went still. Lucas caught his gaze and smiled like a hunter who'd planned this moment. Cole, Lucas said, gliding forward with Ava. Small world, isn't it? Ethan's voice was calm, too calm, smaller than I thought. Lucas's grin sharpened. You remember Ava, she's consulting with us again. Something in Ethan cracked without sound. Ava's eyes found his, guilt heavy as rain. It's not what it looks like. Isn't it? He said, almost tenderly. Ethan, please. But he was already walking away. Some heartbreaks don't explode. They collapse inward until breathing hurts. He sat in the quiet, watching the skyline he once used as proof he couldn't be touched. The storm had passed, but inside him it still raged. He had trusted her, against every instinct, and now she stood beside the man who tried to ruin him. He didn't expect the sound to be a mercy. She closed the door behind her. Ethan, I need you to listen. I've heard enough. He said, voice level over a fault line. No, you haven't. She stepped closer. Lucas found me before the gala. He threatened to expose what I did unless I helped him stage that moment. He wanted you to see us. He wanted to break you. He turned, eyes sudden flame. And you let him? He still has the files, proof I was part of his fraud before I left. If he goes public, it could destroy both of us. Hurt, disbelief, and the love he wouldn't name met in his stare. You should have trusted me. Would you have believed me? Silence answered for him. She drew nearer, tears streaking like the storm on the glass. I never lied about how I felt. You were the only real thing after years of pretending. But I can't stay and let you be destroyed because of my past. Ava, you saved me without knowing. Now I have to save you the only way I can, by leaving. He caught her hand, the plea unguarded. Don't walk away again. Her eyes, full of love and pain, met his one last time. I wish I met you before the world broke us both. She kissed him, soft, desperate, final. When she pulled back, she whispered, Goodbye, Ethan. And then she was gone. He stood for a long time, staring at the door that refused to open itself. Outside, the city thrummed. Inside, everything stilled. She had entered like light through a crack and left just as quietly, taking the darkness with her. For days, he spoke little. But something had changed. He no longer read people as obstacles. He smiled at staff, asked names, offered small kindnesses, habits that surprised him. Because Ava had taught him something unlearnable, how to feel even when it hurts. Some people arrive in your life like a storm, fierce, uninvited, impossible to ignore. And when they leave, you realize they weren't chaos at all. They were change. Ava Morgan was gone. No letter, no explanation, just silence, louder than anything Ethan Cole had ever known. He searched for her quietly, calls unanswered, inquiries returned with polite shrugs. It was as if the city itself had swallowed her whole. Days became weeks, weeks turned to months, and life at Meridian went on, polished, predictable, perfectly functional. But Ethan was no longer the man who built it. The boardroom gleamed beneath the sterile white light of December. Executives murmured numbers, slides shifted, profits rose, the world's same endless loop. But Ethan wasn't watching the graphs anymore. He was watching the snow. Outside the tall glass, flakes fell like unspoken words, covering the skyline in quiet absolution. His reflection looked softer now. The hard edges that once defined him had dulled, replaced not by sadness, but by understanding. When his assistant entered and placed a coffee beside him, he smiled genuinely. "Thank you." She froze for a moment. No one had ever heard those words from him before. Ethan Cole had once ruled through fear. Now he led with something rarer, empathy, because once you've been loved by someone who expected nothing in return, you can never go back to who you were before. He lived differently now. No more silent penthouse evenings filled with the hum of machines. There were signs of life, books scattered on the table, a half-finished painting by the window, the faint scent of coffee and rain drifting through open glass. He often found himself pausing at the little things Ava had touched, her handwriting on an old sticky note, a pen she'd left behind, a folder still labeled in her careful script, quarterly goals. Every object felt like a memory disguised as routine. He never tried to erase her. He let her linger in small traces, like a scar that didn't ache anymore, yet reminded him he had once bled for something real. Time didn't fix the wound. It simply taught him how to live with it. A full year had passed since she vanished. Meridian had grown. New offices, new staff, new ambitions. But Ethan's real growth wasn't in numbers. It lived in his tone, in the patience of his listening, in the way he now looked at people instead of through them. He'd created something new, the Meridian Hope Fund, a program for young women rebuilding careers after corporate betrayal. No one knew where the idea came from, but those close to him, they understood. At the heart of the tower's lobby stood a small plaque, engraved simply, "To those who teach us to feel again." He never explained it. He didn't have to. It was a gray Thursday when he wandered into a small cafe between two bookstores. Not the kind of place CEOs visited, but he wasn't here as one. He ordered black coffee and sat by the window, tracing the movement of raindrops sliding down the glass. Rainy afternoons always reminded him of her. That first morning she'd walked into his office, calm and fearless in cream-colored sleeves. He didn't come to wait. He came to remember. But memory had other plans. Through the fogged window across the street, he saw her, Ava, standing beneath a black umbrella, speaking to a little boy no older than 8, his small hand tucked safely in hers. She looked different now, lighter, calmer, a simple gray coat, a pale scarf, rain glinting in her hair. Motherhood had softened her eyes but deepened her peace. Ethan's breath faltered. For a long moment, he couldn't move. She hadn't seen him. He watched as she knelt, adjusting the boy's collar, laughing at something he said. It wasn't the laugh he remembered. It was freer, untouched by sorrow. He could have stood up. He could have crossed the street. He could have said her name. But he didn't. Because sometimes, love isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let someone finally be happy. He stayed there for a long while, just watching. The street shimmered with passing headlights, the city alive beyond the glass. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. He thought of her voice. That night she said, "You saved me without even knowing it." Back then, he'd assumed it was a lie she told to make goodbye easier. But now he understood. She meant it. And she had saved him too. She crossed the street with the boy, walking past the cafe without ever looking inside. Her hair brushed her face. Her silver necklace caught the faint light. Ethan smiled, small, grateful, peaceful. "Goodbye, Ava," he whispered. The boy tugged at her sleeve, pointing to the rain. She smiled down and said something he couldn't hear, but her lips formed the words. "It's nothing, just rain." He returned to Meridian that evening, rain still clinging to his coat. The city shimmered outside his windows, reflections rippling like distant memories. On his desk lay an envelope, plain, white, unmarked. His name written in delicate handwriting. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside, a card and a folded photograph. The card read, "Thank you for letting me heal, even when it hurt you." He unfolded the photograph. It showed a small school in another city, children laughing in the courtyard, paintbrushes and notebooks in their hands. At the corner of the picture stood Ava, smiling gently. On the back, written in her handwriting, "You once told me success means building something that lasts. This is mine. I hope yours is happiness." Ethan's vision blurred. He sat down, holding the photo like it was both gift and farewell. She hadn't vanished after all. She had simply chosen something greater, a life that meant more than power ever could. In her own quiet way, she had sent him closure. After that night, Ethan never searched again. He didn't need to. He began mentoring young employees himself, something he'd never done before. He taught not only strategy, but kindness. Not just how to win, but how to stay human while doing it. When reporters asked about his sudden shift in leadership, he smiled and said, "Someone once reminded me that people aren't data, they're stories." And every time he said it, he thought of her. Months later, on a quiet Sunday evening, Ethan stood alone on the same rooftop terrace where they'd once shared coffee in silence. The city stretched before him, wrapped in sunset gold. He took out his phone, opened the photograph of the foundation, and studied it again. This time, he smiled, not with longing, but pride. "You did it, Ava," he whispered. "You made it mean something." He slipped the phone back into his pocket, leaning on the railing as wind brushed his coat. Below him, the city pulsed. Cars, voices, laughter, millions of lives overlapping like verses in the same poem. And though she was gone, he felt her everywhere, in the laughter of his staff, in the patience of strangers, in every quiet evening that no longer felt empty. Love doesn't always stay. Sometimes it visits to teach you what staying means. Ava Morgan had taught Ethan Cole that love wasn't about possession. It was about transformation. That healing doesn't come from forgetting, but from remembering without breaking. As the sun dipped below the skyline, he finally understood what he had been chasing his entire life. Success builds empires, but love builds people. He looked toward the fading light and whispered, "Wherever you are, thank you." A gentle wind moved through the terrace, cool and kind, as if the city itself whispered back, "You're welcome." Ah.